Hi, welcome to iOS development tutorial lesson 5. In this class, this is going to be the first part of Objective C. So we'll be covering about class, what is a class, object, what is an interface file, implementation file, and then methods. And we will see all these things using we'll write an example and then we'll try to see what each one refers to. So a class, it's a blueprint from which objects are created. So what we are going to do is now we are going to create a class for adding two numbers and then instantiate that particular class and create objects and then supply two numbers to that particular object to that instance and get the result. So while doing this, we will see what is an interface file, implementation file, and also we'll define a method or the action which actually does the addition of two numbers. So let's go to the Xcode. So I'm just going for a single view application, a single view project, and I've selected iOS. So anyway, in our example is just going to print the result in NSLog, using NSLog. So it doesn't matter which template you're going to choose. So I'll just go for single view application, and for the product name I'm just going to say addition tutorial, and I'm going to set the devices as iPhone and continue creating the project. Okay, so now I've got the default file for the files for the single view application. Now in order to add the two numbers, we are going to define a class which only does that functionality. So I'm right clicking on the project folder, selecting new file, and I'm going for the Objective C class. In the subclass, I'm going for NS object. So here I'm giving the name of the class as addition. So that's the purpose of this class. So now I create the files under our project folder. So now you should see a header file .h file, addition.h file, and addition.m file. Now in order to supply those two numbers, we are going to define a property here. So non-atomic, we will see about this scope and what are these property values in the later classes. For time being, now you can just follow this, assume that a property is created in this way, and the number is going to be of type integer. So I'm saying number 1 and I say number 1. Similarly, I'm going for another property, and what this property does is it's going to give the second number, so or accept, it's going to provide the second number. So assign n as integer and number 2. Now I need a method or an action which actually adds these two numbers, and this action we call it as method, or sometimes we even refer it to as function. So I'm going to define here the template of this method. So basically only the skeleton of this method, and the implementation of this method will be done in the implementation file, that is addition.m. So this method is going to return us n as integer object. So that is going to be the addition of these two numbers, and I'm going to give the name of this method as get result. Probably leave some space, and then I close this method. So I've defined the skeleton of this method. So it's going to, there is no the result the return parameter of this method is an integer type. Now I'm going for the implementation file. So what I'm going to do in this implementation file is, now the reason we have defined the property is, now if I say add synthesis number 1 and add synthesis number, so this would automatically create the get and getter and setter methods for number 1 and number 2. So it clearly gives us a warning that okay, you have defined a method get result, but you have not implemented this, so which we are going to do now. So just to repeat this definition of property, so we have defined a property here, number 1, number 2, and then what we have done is we have synthesized number 1 and number 2. So what this would do is this would automatically create the getter and setter methods for us, so that we can access it from other code, which we'll see now. Yeah. So now to define this method, what we are going to do is, so it's going to return n as integer, and it is get result. So now to define this, what we'll do is, okay, make it just simple. We'll just say return number 1 plus number 2. Okay, that's it. So we have now defined a class or a blueprint which is going to accept 2 numbers and provide the result of that 2 numbers. Now what we are going to do is we are going to instantiate this class, and that is, we are going to create objects of this class, and we are going to supply 2 numbers to this object and get the result from the object. So let's just go for the view did load method. So anyway, we are going to use only the nslog for printing the result. So first step, what we are going to do is instantiate the class and create new addition object, then supply 2 numbers for addition object, then get the result and print it using nslog. So now what we, so addition class, so this is the class which we have created, and the object name I'm going to give it as addition. So now I need to log and then initialize that particular object. Now you are seeing this mark use of undeclared identifier addition. That's because it's expecting us the import statement. So let's import the class addition.h, and I'm closing this object. Now the next, again you get this error is because we need to, it's a reference, mean it's a, you need to declare it as, you need to put this pointer for this object. Now let's supply the 2 numbers. So addition dot number 1 equal to, let's say 15, and addition dot number 2 equal to 20. Now use nslog, so result, and I'm going to give the %d for, since we are going to print a integer value, so the attribute that we need to use is %d, comma addition dot, so the method which is going to give us this result is get result, and close the button. So now we have completed this program which by supplying two numbers, and then we are trying to print the result. Let's see what the program does. Now I'm just changing the simulator from iPad to iPhone Retina 4-inch. Let me do a command B and see whether how does it do the build. Do I have any errors? So it seems to be fine. Now let's run this application in this simulator. Now we should see in the console, we should see the result of those two numbers. Yeah, so now you have the result 35. So now we have seen a very simple program which does the addition of two numbers. Before we wind up, we'll just see one more changes to this program. What we'll do is, so here we saw, okay, we have created two properties, and then we are using that property. We are setting this property in the class, in the object, and then we are trying to get the result. Now let's create a new method, and what this method add number 1 with number 2. Okay, so I get a error here. It's expecting. What I should be doing is close this and then close this ns integer. So now what we are doing here is, so we don't need a new property, and we have created a method which is going to accept arguments. So in the previous get result, we just, what that particular method does is it just return the result. So now add numbers. So the method add numbers is going to accept two numbers as an argument, number 1 and number 2. Add number 1 with number 2. Okay, I think this makes sense. So the method name is add number 1 with number 2, and it's going to give a result of ns integer. So now let's navigate to the view controller. Now let's comment out of setting these two numbers. Now let's directly get into this. So this is another way of calling the method. So add, you could see autocomplete gives us the new method name, add number 1. So I'm going to give 15 with number 2 20, and close this bracket, and now let's build and rerun this project. So now let's see what's the result of this. Okay, I got some exception here. So what's the error? Unrecognized selector sent. So why is this? Okay, the problem what I have done here is, okay, I have defined it in the interface file, but that is the template of the method I have defined. But what I have not done is I haven't implemented this method. So let's implement this method in our implementation file. Then give the result. Okay, the problem we have here is that we already have a variable or property defined as number1 and number2. So I'm just going to change this as no1 and no2 just to avoid confusion. So here again no1, no2, no1 and no2. So now let's see how this program works. So I'm compiling, then running the project. So now we got the result. So what we have covered here is we have created a new class, and then we instantiated the addition class here, created a new object, and while creating the class we saw what's an interface file and what is the purpose of having an interface file, and what is that you need to define in an interface file. And then we saw how an implementation file is used. So while creating the method, we saw we have created a method which doesn't accept any argument, and we also created a method which accepts 2 argument, and then we use this particular class to create a addition object, and then we printed the result by passing 2 numbers to this addition object. There's one as a part of naming convention, what I've done here is I've given it as a capital A, and which generally is not advisable. So it's always better to start with a lowercase letter, add number, and add number1 with number2. I'm changing that. Okay. Hope you're able to follow this tutorial. Please subscribe to the channel, and in the next class we will see about the different data types in Objective-C and variables, and what are variables in Objective-C. If you have any queries, please post it as a comment, and I will try to answer ASAP. Thank you.